So creepy.
Well, that got recorded, so. I'm calling this meeting to order. This is the annual meeting of 2023 for the League of Women Voters of Greeley-Weld County. And I want to encourage everyone who would like more food, coffee, whatever, we'll leave it out for a while, but we will take it up in a bit. And Corleone's will come back at 11 to get it. If you haven't gotten an agenda, there's some back there on that table, along with extra copies of anything that you might need, like the annual meeting minutes from last year, the treasurer's report, and there's a half sheet of bylaws information that we'll deal with later. And the other thing I wanted to bring your attention to is that in the original minutes agenda, I neglected to put in there electing delegates for the League of Women Voters of Colorado annual meeting, which is in May. And we will, but it's on this current agenda, and we will deal with that toward the end of the meeting. So welcome, everybody. And Sandy Magnuson and I welcome you as chairs, current chairs. And Sandy has done a lovely job of the decor. So we don't do anything except high class, right?
Very classy.
Very nice. Thank you. Thank you. And thanks also to Jean Lippman and Sierra for putting together the technology this morning. We are going to have a very special speaker this morning, Rhonda Solis, who I think almost everybody knows, but if you don't, you are in for a treat, because she is our representative to the state of Colorado School Board. And it has been very exciting for us to have somebody that not only represents our area, but we know her. It's just great. And she is going, and she has been on our local school board here in Greeley, so she's got lots of experience. And she is going to tell us all about the school board and education in Colorado, and what we ought to know, and then what we ought to be doing about it. So welcome.
Thank you. So first I want to say what a pleasure it is to be here. The history of the League of Women Voters and just the work that has been done and continues to be done is just so important. So just thank you for continuing to carry this work on. It never ends. And so you all have been a huge part of making sure that democracy is done and that it's done well. So thank you for your continued work. Again, my name is Rhonda Solis. I grew up in Greeley. I graduated from Greeley-West High School. I'm a Spartan. My kids are also part of District 6. They both graduated from Northridge High School. And when I was a parent, I was obviously an advocate for my kiddos. So that's kind of probably where my advocacy started. Once I graduated high school, I was afraid to go to college, so I didn't. So I did what I thought I was supposed to do. I got married, I started a family, I have 2 beautiful children, and I was working in an industry that at that time was a really tough industry. It's the dentistry industry. And here in Greeley at that time, we only had 2 female dentists, and I was fortunate enough to work for one of them. And while I was working for her, I was just astonished at the power of this woman. I mean, just how educated she was, how hard she worked, how hard she fought. And for someone who was very quiet in school, I didn't join any clubs, I didn't join any sports, anything like that. I didn't get involved at all. I didn't have or felt like I had a voice. So once I started working for her, at first it was really intimidating. I didn't think I could do it. I felt like her standards were up here and I was like right here. I was taught on the job. I didn't go to school to learn how to be a dental assistant, but I stuck it out and I realized she wasn't mean. She wasn't hard. she was just doing what she had to do in an industry that didn't make space for her. And I learned some really valuable skills from her, and I'm still in contact with her, which is so great, because I really do feel like she helped me feel strong as a female. And for many of us in this room, we know how challenging and the barriers and the walls that have been put up before us in lots of different ways in society. So while I was working for her, I had a few experiences that led me to understand it wasn't enough for me to jump through all the hoops that I already jumped through. It wasn't enough for me to feel like a strong woman, because I was a woman with brown skin, and that was different. And no matter how many things I did right, there would always be someone to point out that I had brown skin. So then I had to figure out, okay, my next step is, how do I learn about that? Where do I go? And fortunately for me, there was an organization called Hispanic Women of Weld County. So, you know, it's one of those things happen for a reason. I had just been watching TV. We had a city council member who was doing interviews with community members, and Juanita Martinez Rocha was on there. And that's how I heard about it. I was like, that's it. I got to go do that. Got to be part of that group. So I started with this group of women who were different ages, different backgrounds, but I started to learn things about people that look like me that I had never heard before. Things and stories of doors that they opened that I didn't even realize were closed. And so the more I learned about that, the more I developed this, not only respect and just kind of, you know, carrying my head a little higher, but also this responsibility of a lot of these people opened up doors for me. And so what am I going to do? And it was at that point that I realized that I really had to get involved. We had some women that were very active in the community, some that were very political. And so I just kind of learned that you had these avenues that you could advocate for people and really be a voice for some people that may not feel like they had a voice. So I started doing that work. I started, you know, I took the city of Greeley community training to learn more about how the city was run. I took the Greeley Police Citizens Academy. I just started absorbing any kind of training I could do to learn more about my community and add to my little tool belt of how I was going to advocate for people. You have to know the systems that you're working with. Then I started learning about more organizations in Denver. And in Denver, they were a lot bigger. They had a lot more support. And you had people that had experience running for office, doing a lot of different things. And that's really where I started to get my strong base. So I started serving on different boards in Greeley, different commissions, started working with different groups, and really started finding my footing. And I didn't know what office I was going to run for. I just knew I was going to run for office. And then someone approached me and said, you know, hey, there's an opening on the local school board. You ought to consider running. And I was like, no, I don't think that's the office. But then I started looking at it more, and there were no Latinos on the board. And it's like, how can that be when we have a school district that's over 50% Latino? How do we not have that lens? How do we not have that voice? So I was like, okay, yep, that's it. I got to do that. So I decided to run. There were 4 seats open, 8 people running. I was number 7 in donations, but because of the work I had done in the community, I was number 3 in votes. And so that's my story to a lot of people of when they tell me, well, my vote doesn't count, or, you know, it just doesn't matter that I get involved. I got elected because people showed up. And so that's really a big message for me that I can take out there, because I have felt the same way in certain situations. It's the same people getting elected. It's the people with money. It's the people that, you know, have all of these things. So how do we break that? How do we get in there? And this is how, by voting. So I served 4 years. At the first beginning, our district was a mess. And luckily, we had an amazing person in charge of our chamber, Sarah McQuitty, who really started to think about community and education in a different way. And before I got elected, she brought Jamie Vollmer out to our community. And we started to have that conversation of how important it is that a community wraps its arms around a district, and how it is our responsibility to make sure this district does well. So that was that initial seed that was planted. Then after that, we had brought in a superintendent from Miami-Dade. And although it was a bigger scale, we did have a lot of the same challenges. So we were, you know, picking his brain on, you know, how do you do it out there? What are the secret, you know, things that you've developed within your district that you've seen be successful? And at the time, we had a superintendent that wasn't really open to these conversations, which was frustrating. So when I got elected, the community took it a step further. And we had city council members, we had school board members, we had county commissioners, we had community leaders, business leaders, and we all went to Kalamazoo, Michigan, because we wanted to learn how they do the Kalamazoo Promise. And the Kalamazoo Promise is a scholarship for every child that graduates to go to college. So we wanted to figure out, well, how do you fund that? And it really was a community effort. You had to plan financially how to bring in more money and then pool that money to do these scholarships. So the downtown stuff that you're seeing kind of was sparked from Kalamazoo, Michigan. And they're bringing in a hotel and putting businesses around that hotel and really developing that tax revenue to do these scholarships. So there's this story, and the reason I tell this story, because I really do feel like we have been that story of how you make sure your district is successful. And it is a challenge, and it's targeted every day in communities, and here too, even with all our success. So once I got on the board and we started doing this Kalamazoo conversation, we realized as a board, it was time for different leadership at our school district. And so we as a board decided, we need to look for new leadership. And there was a lot of backlash. I received a lot of people upset with me, thinking we were going in the right direction. But on the inside, in the inside of our district, it was like triage. We were in emergency state. And I even had fights with my fellow board members that had been on the board for a while and wanted to keep things going the same direction. And valid points of being fiscally responsible, because if we cut her contract, that was a year of salary we were going to have to pay out. But I knew in my heart, I knew from what my experience was within the district, the conversations that I had had with teachers, that we needed to pull the plug now. It was way beyond the time, and we had to do it now. So if I had to take backlash, I was ready to do that. So we ended up doing that. And we as a board decided, you know what, we're going to do this different, because it's the board that actually hires the superintendent. We said, nope, we're going to do this different. We're going to bring community groups together. We're going to interview all the superintendent applicants, and we as a community are going to pick this superintendent. And that's how Dr. Pilch became our superintendent. And that first message, that first thing that we did, started to tell community, we're in this together, we're going to be transparent, and we're going to work at partnerships in this endeavor. And so Dr. Pilch brought in new energy, new eyes, new resources, new ideas, and we started to do consensus decision-making, because what we had been under before is top-down theory. I'm going to make the decisions, you're going to do what I tell you to do, and that's how this goes. And we were like, no, because we have to depend on these teachers to follow these decisions that we make. They may not totally understand how we got these decisions, and there's going to be, that's where part of that problem lied. So we did some consensus decision work where we spent 3 days together. We had people in the district, we had board members, we had people in administration, and we had 3 hard days. That first day was us talking about how the process works and why it works. The second day was us just listening. We had teachers in tears of their experience in our school district, which was heart-wrenching for me. And I mean, these were teachers that really felt traumatized. So that third day was, okay, how are we going to solve these problems? And what we came up with is consensus decision-making, meaning if we're going to get rid of a program, or we're going to add a program and then we need to get rid of one in order to fund this one, we're making that decision together, because we're all going to be responsible for taking this out or bringing this in. And that was a whole new way of thinking about doing leadership in District 6, and it worked. We started getting 2-year contracts with our union. When I first came on, we had a lawsuit against us, and we had some really, really tough challenges. We had some hard work to do. Education is challenging every day, and it doesn't seem to be lessening at all. So after 4 years, I decided to run again. I didn't have any opponent. And at that time, we were actually going for a mill levy override. And that was our 3rd attempt. 2 times we had failed. And so I was lucky enough to not even have to campaign. And I was gung-ho on the MLO, and it passed. And then we ended up passing a bond before I ended up getting out of office. And what was so interesting is that when I left Greeley-West High School, I was like, I didn't join any sports. There's no pictures in the hallway of me. No one would have even known that I went there. I left no mark. And now I was at this ribbon cutting for this bond money, rebuilding the high school I graduated from. And it was like, this is it. When I tell kids, you're gonna make your mark, you may not know when or how, but it's gonna happen. Just make sure you've lined up everything to be prepared for it, because it will happen. You just have to be patient, which I'm not very patient. So it was a challenge for me. But once it happened, it was like, this feels amazing. And now there's this plaque within that high school that has my name on it, because all the board members that were on the board when that bond passed are on that plaque. And that is a huge, huge a testament to the hard work that we've done as a community, hard work that that board did, and just kind of where we are. And the reason I tell this story is because when I decided to run for the state board, this is what I took to the table. And when I got elected, which was very challenging, and again, I went through that process. We started a nonprofit, a few friends of mine, and we started getting involved in COVID and what was happening at JBS and the people, the workers of color there that were dying. And so we had kind of been involved in that. And then boom, redistricting was happening. Now, I didn't have a lot of experience in redistricting. I didn't know a lot about it. I was a newbie. But once I started to learn the history and what had happened over years, it was like, oh yes, we as an organization, we need to be part of this conversation. And the possibility that we could be joining another county that had a lot of reflective community members like we had, and that we could pull that power together and truly feel like we could get representation. Yes, we had to go to all those meetings and make sure that we speak up for our community. Now we have the usuals, county commissioners going in there, talking about all the wealth here in Weld County, talking about, the Montforts and how, JBS started from the Montforts and, our construction companies. We have lots of those here, and just the wealth that has happened in Weld County. But what they didn't hear about was the workers that have been here generation after generation, helping to create that wealth. And those were the people that I wanted to make sure were represented in this new district. So fortunately, we've been working with people that had been drawing the maps, and we got in. We're in CD8. That's exciting. Well, then the phone started ringing. We have this new position at the State Board of Education, and we need someone to run. And it was like, no, I just got done with 8 years. And I started taking the leadership Northern Colorado, and that was amazing. And, again, adding to my tool belt, knowing that something probably would come along. I just didn't know what. And here it was. And I did the same thing that I did when I ran for local board. I looked at the board and there were no people of color. So again, I said, all right, I have to do this. So I just decided to run. I ended up winning. I'm very proud. We have our first Latina at Washington from Colorado, and is from CD8. That's a huge, huge accomplishment. And when we actually looked at the numbers, which I was astonished, I actually outperformed her. And I had $77,000 that I raised for my race. She had millions, and I outperformed her. And so I was like, this is amazing. I love this. So I get elected. And then I found out your term is only 2 years. Normally they're 6. Mine is only 2. I was like, wait, what? And so we go to do the research, and there was nowhere to Google this information. It showed up nowhere. Media didn't know. Lots of people didn't know. And the thing that bothered me the most is that the voters in CD8 didn't know. And you talk about needing to be transparent, making sure that people understand. And here we continue to put barriers in front of them, even candidates running for an office. I should be aware of how long this position is. There was nothing on the Secretary of State website, nothing that would have told me this was only a 2-year term. The only place you would have found it is like the 131-page legislation bill that was passed around redistricting, little statute in there. Or if you read the educational law book, which was printed in October of 2022. Otherwise, there was no other place to read it. Now, the reasoning they gave me is because they have to make sure these seats are staggered. I understand that. We have that here at the local board. But this is a congressional district seat. I should have been able to run for 6 years because we also had to add an at-large seat. And that at-large seat can go away if census tells us we have a bigger population and we need to create another district, because you have to have an odd number at the state board. Now, I was with a lot of people. I didn't fully understand what the state board did either. Who are they? What do they do? No one, they weren't even on the radar. It's, not exciting work. It doesn't really get a lot of attention. And so once I got in there and I started to learn, it was like, oh my gosh, they do have a lot of power. I had no idea. And on my local level, I was so entrenched in local issues and just fixing what we had to fix. I didn't even pay attention to the state. Although I knew we had people going to the state before them, talking about our turnaround schools that we had, which at the beginning of my term on the local school board was a lot. By the end, we only had 2. And so I wasn't really involved in that. Our board president would go to the state board level and talk about the great progress we were doing, what we've done to change, and what our plan is to make sure that our schools are doing better. So once I got on the board, it was like drinking from a fire hose. It's like, oh my gosh, there is a lot of reading, a lot to do. And so basically what the state board does is once the legislation is passed around K-12, we roll that out. We make all the rules, how that's going to look, how that districts have to, abide by that. We do all of that with CDA or CDE, the Colorado Department of Education. But we as a board direct that on what we want to make sure that we see, what we want to make sure happens. And while I was running, House Bill 1192 was a big form of discussion. So that had passed in 2019. And that bill had said, Colorado schools need to teach history about Latinos, about African Americans, Asians, LGBTQ. We needed to make sure all of that story was part of there. Now, what was interesting is in my process to add to my tool belt, I took the Latino Leadership Institute over at DU. I had no idea that the Colorado Constitution was written in 3 languages. It was written in English, Spanish, and German. Now, I have to tell you, that hit me in a way that I didn't expect. Because when you learn about the Spanish language, when you learn about, thank you, people that were my mom's age getting punished in schools for speaking Spanish, it's hard for me to fathom when that's how our state started. And so there were lots of internal feelings I had once I learned that, and recognizing why it was so important that I was running, and why something like House Bill 1192 is so important, and what that could mean to a kiddo that looks like me in K-12 education, hearing that I may be demonized out in the public, I may be demonized in our newspaper as far as people that look like me, but we've been here from the inception. We've been part of Colorado and all the work that has happened here from the beginning. And we need to make sure that our kids know that, feel that, and really carry that responsibility of how do I make it better? And that's why K-12 is so, so important to me. So when I got on the school board on the state, I met with a lot of people from CDE. And one of the things I recognized is I was one of the youngest people on the board. I was the only person of color on the board, and I was the only person without a college degree. And there were going to be lots of people in those rooms talking about things that I may not be familiar with. But the advantage of that is I know those things are going to get taken care of. I know those questions are going to be asked. There's experts in the room that have worked in education enough that know the right questions to ask. But my conversation to CDE people and even the state board members is everyone comes at solving these issues from inside the district out. My concept is community coming in. And I don't think that we can truly solve educational issues in a district without thinking of the district, the students, and the community. And unless those things are all aligned, you will have some deficit in your school district.
And we have people who think it's just the superintendent that you have. That's not it. We had that. And although I will give her credit, I think when she came on initially, she was exactly what we needed. Her way of functioning, we were in a lot of trouble in District 6. In the beginning, she was what we needed. We just held on to her too long. So it's not to demonize her. It's mainly that we needed to do some different things. We were at a different part now in our community. And the reason I say all this about community is because I learned a lot of things at the state level and the power that they have that could really interfere with the community in a way that I don't think is actually appropriate. And I have to be very clear, I speak as myself, not the board. But what we see is that the district is in trouble and it's a certain amount of time that they've been on the clock. We as a state board can tell them you need to reorganize, whether that's changing your boundaries, whether that's dissolving your district and letting other districts absorb you, whether that's charters need to come in and take over your schools. And I think about that from my local perspective, and it's like, wait a minute. Because when we were out there talking to people about the MLO, when we were out there talking about the bond, we had people who didn't have kids in the district. And we were telling them, you need to vote for this. And why? Because that school district is the first place that business is going to look when they're going to set up shop. That school district is the first place a family is going to look to before they move into your community. And that is tax revenue. Now you're messing with the community's tax revenue. I find that very, very concerning. Now, I understand it is our responsibility at the state board to make sure that all kids are learning. But there is no bigger price that people pay when a district's not doing well as the community that the district is in. And so there's no one that has more stake in the game, more that are going to feel the ramifications of not doing well than that community. And it's very hard for me as a state board member to vote for something that could affect tax revenue for a community that I don't even live in. And so these are some of the things that I have concerns with as a state board level. The other thing that we have to talk about is just kind of the history of education. So what we've seen is there's a lot of money to be made in education. And we kind of have three lanes of educational push. We have the privatization sector, we have the charter sector, and we have traditional public ed. Now, charter is part of public ed, but they function a little different. And the reason that is because they have their own board, and it's separate from the local school board. They have their own autonomy. And so what we've seen in the history here is that our charters were white flight. When you didn't want your kid to go to a school that had kids of color, you could, with privilege, drive them to a charter that doesn't provide transportation. They don't translate a lot of their information. District 6 has over 100 languages within their district, and they charge some fees. Those are some barriers that may be unsaid that could keep certain kids out. Now, we've done a lot of work locally to work on the relationship with charters and not be so contentious. We realize they're here. We want them to do well. These are our kids too. So we need to figure out how we do that work well together. And I think Dr. Pilch has done a really great job at working on those relationships. And we do have some great charters. We have some great private schools. We have different opportunities. And I say opportunities, not choices, because if you can't get your kid to a school, that's not a choice. If you can't afford the fees that they charge, that's not a choice. If your parents who are monolingual Spanish can't read the district information, that's not a choice for you. So I say there are different opportunities. And within District 6, we have done a really good job at creating opportunities in lots of different areas, giving our kids exposure to different career pathways, internships, new stuff that we need to be thinking about down the pipeline, whether it's cybersecurity. There's lots of different opportunities for kids to get an introduction to what they may want to do with their life. That may be a certificate program at Ames. which Ames just got recognized as being one of the best community colleges. Bravo. So we have lots of great partners to make sure that our kids are either career or college ready. And I think we're doing a shift where before we thought every kiddo had to go to college. And we know that's not true. We know that not every kid can be successful on a college campus and that there are some barriers there. But we want to make sure that they're successful, that they can have a family, that they could live, that they could, do all the things that we all wish that we could have for ourselves and our children. And so I think District 6 has done an amazing job at creating different opportunities, partnering with UNC, Ames, community members, and also even our business industry. Dr. Pilch has a business group that she meets with to talk about what are those next workers that you need? What do we need to be thinking about when it comes to our kiddos and making sure that they have opportunities that will prepare them for those jobs? So that visionary thinking is what you really, really need in a leader. Now, you're going to hear backlash at some of our school board meetings locally about how much Dr. Pilch gets paid. And let me tell you, just being part in the boardroom, she earns it just there. But the partnerships that she has recreated that were dissolved before, the relationship that she has with the city managers, the city councils, the mayors, all of these different relationships that take a very unique personality to be able to do, she does that. And she deserves the salary that she gets. Now, we've seen, a city manager get a raise who was male and nobody balked. But for some reason, this woman who does one of the hardest jobs there is criticized on the regular about her salary. And as someone who has interviewed with her, someone who has worked with her, someone who has watched her do her stuff, she is exactly what we need. And my message to community is, not only do we have people here that recognize it, there's people outside this community that recognize it, and they will be headhunting her. There are lots of people that could do well with her as their superintendent. And so we have got to fight to keep her. This community has to rally around her and make sure she's protected and that she's supported by a board that will continue to do what has been done and set up to be done in the future. And that strategic plan that has been put forward, 2030, is a good plan. And you have people that want to tear that apart. And it's not even about kids for them. I'm sorry, it's not about kids. Because when you come into a boardroom and say, I want to be able to checking out a certain book, I respect that. Then you just tell the school, my kid is not allowed to go to the library. Can you find something else for them to do? Because you can't make that decision for all kids. It's okay to make it for yours, but you cannot make it for all. And I have a really hard time when I hear people come into a boardroom talking about children, and I never hear them talk about social media and the impacts of social media. Or where I never hear them talk about guns, and that being the #1 killer of our kids. That tells me this isn't about kids, it's political. And that bothers me that they would come into these boardrooms and use our children as political pawns. And that should not be allowed on our watch. If you haven't watched the school board meetings, they're online, watch them. If you haven't been in the audience, show up. They need you. And we have an election coming up. There's going to be some vacancies on our local school board. And those people that show up in our boardroom have people running. And if we want to make sure that we continue the work locally, that we have all got to show up. And you all have to do the work that you do on the regular. And that's talking to voters, putting on forums, making sure people show up, making sure that they're educated, know the people that are running, and really help them get to the polls to vote for people, because voting matters. And I'm proof of that. So the other thing that we've seen politically, which concerns me, is we have seen this change around charters. And when I say a change, our local charters have a local board. These are local business people, local parents that serve on that board. I appreciate that. But there's also this outside charter environment coming in where the board isn't even local. Or if there is a local person, it's just like one or two. The rest are out of community board members making decision on a school that's in your community. I have a problem with that. If you're not invested in my community, if you're not part of this tax system, then I have a problem with you making a decision on how we educate our kids. That should be a local decision. Now, when I first got on the board, I was really intrigued that I'm a Democrat, but when I came on and I saw Republicans on the board voting the way they did, it was like, aren't you guys for small government? But yet they were voting through every charter, whether it was a local board or not. And I was just astounded by that. It's like, okay, I guess I'll be the conservative in the room, because I do believe in local control. I do feel like it's a community's responsibility to make sure a school district is doing well. And when I was on the local board and we went through COVID, I had some pretty harsh comments from people when we decided to go back in person. And I get it, it was scary. And I was worried about students, I was worried about their families, I was worried about teachers, I was worried about their families. And it was a scary time, and I get it. But I had people telling me, you know, if teachers die because you're bringing them back, you know, can we hold you responsible? And it's like, yes, you can, because I'm still gonna be on the board. I'm still gonna be working or walking in the grocery store that you walk into. You will be holding me accountable. And that's why I think local leadership matters, and that we must keep boards local. So again, we've had privatization, we've had charters, and we've had traditional public ed. They've all kind of been going in their own lanes, fighting for per pupil funding, and they've been parallel. But this whole political environment that's happened, privatization and charters have now crossed. And so they're going to have to take on partners and certain viewpoints that maybe they didn't before. And here's my concern about plucking kids out of traditional ed. As many of my friends of color have really fought for charters, because we can put a charter in that will teach about our history and will give them that empowerment that you got. I get that. I love that. And that comes from community. But what I also know, especially living in this community, is the exact opposite can pop up from community. I do not think these are healthy. And when we talk about making sure that our kids are college or career ready, we have to make sure they're going and experiencing the world that they'll go into when they go to college, that they'll go into when they have a career. And that includes people of color, different shades, different cultures, different backgrounds, different partners, all of that. And if we get them exposed to that early and starting to understand, starting to work with that, that gives them an extra positive thing once they start going out there and doing that work. The other concern I have, and this is a social thing that I don't know how we do different, and it really was evident during COVID, where we as a society, it was about me. How about me? What about what I think? And I know that we all have rights. I understand that, I get that. And we've created a society where it is all about me. And we have some really tough issues to conquer in our future. And the only way we're going to do that is together. And when I watched COVID, I was heartbroken, because I remember hearing history stories of us going to war and people giving up things, or, you know, actually entering into the military, or now I have to go out and get a job as a woman. I didn't have to do that before, but the men are gone, so we have to step up. And all of us banding together to get through a really, really tough time. I didn't see that in COVID. And that was heart-wrenching for me, because at a time that we should have rallied as a country with stuff that was very unknown. And I agree, the information was very complex. It was confusing. It changed all the time. Don't even get me started on stuff that wasn't translated. So it was a very hard time. And we did the exact opposite of what we've been known to do. And that broke my heart. And it scared me because I thought, if I was an enemy of the United States, if I was an enemy wanting to hurt them, I don't have to go to war. I would just have to introduce something and let them fight each other. And that was heart-wrenching for me to experience. I was heartbroken. And the hardest thing about watching what has happened in our boardrooms is that children are watching. They pay attention to what we say, what we do, and then they start to do it. And we started to see that behavior in our schools. And I had a friend of mine who works with kids. She's an attorney, and she's a guardian at Lytton. And she's like, you know, Rhonda, I have so many kids in schools right now. And it, you know, I don't think I've seen it at this level. And I told her, have you watched the boardroom? Of course these kids are acting out. Have you not witnessed the behavior of adults? Of course they're acting out. And you know, it's been hard to be a school board member and see what we ask of kids, what we expect of kids at such a young age that we don't expect of other adults. And when I came on the board at the state level, there was a certain person, and we've seen him, I've heard things, but you know, I'm one of those people, I'm just gonna go in there, I'm gonna see what it's like, I'll make my decision from there. He was awful. The way he treated us fellow board members, the way he treats people that come before him, I was just like, okay, wait, we're in education. We have legislation about bullying that comes through us, and we pass it down to districts. And we tell kids, when you see something, you say something. When you see a kid being bullied, you say something. And I was experiencing it in my boardroom, and no one was saying anything. And that's what I mean. We expect kids to narc on their peers when they see behavior that is bullyish. And yet I was in a room of adults watching bully behavior, and no one was saying a word because no one wanted to feel uncomfortable. No one wanted to ruffle any feathers. And I kept hearing the same thing. He's very nice. He's usually very nice. And I told him, I said, you know, when you go to a family function and you have that one uncle, I call out that uncle, and I will call out this uncle. And so I have been very vocal because I will not ask a child to do something that I myself as an adult won't do. I think it is a huge responsibility to put kids in a position where they have to tell on their peers. And it's a good thing. And we benefit when we know kids are not doing well, or they're in trouble, or something's happening. We benefit because we can intervene and help them. But to watch it at an adult level, I mean, even what's happened in the boardroom at District 6, to watch adults behave the way they have has just been astonishing to me. Especially when we just had kids getting an award for amazing things that they've done. And still they will go in there and tear apart this district in any way, shape, or form. And public education is a target. It is happening across the nation. There is a national, way of doing it. They have, the sites that you need to go on, the things you need to say, what you need to go in that boardroom with, how you rally people. And that's why this book ban thing happened. Because it's worked in the past. It's riled up people. And that's why they used it. But it makes no sense because we're in 2023 and we have computers and phones, but we still saw people get excited about it. And so we know it works, and that's why they did it. So we have to push back, and we don't have to be rude. We don't have to be the same behavior, but we do have to stand up and say, we appreciate what you're doing. It's hard work. It's important work, and we got your back. And it's not going to happen on our watch. We're going to vote. We're going to get everybody we know to vote to make sure that we continue to support the work that's happening at District 6. And that conversation needs to be happening in every single community, because the work we've done here, to me, is the recipe for success. And if you have one of those things out of line, if you have one of those things out of whack, it tears it apart. Which is why at the state board level, I push so hard that it's not just about the district. It's not just about the superintendent. It's about the parents. It's about that community. It's about the business community. It's about community leadership in that community. And all of those things have to be in alignment. Now, we've seen some charters that have gotten some really great work done. And they had the same response from COVID that every other traditional school did. All CMAS scores went down. And there was just an accountability report that came out that shows charters are not doing much better than traditional ed, which is interesting to me because charters are a lot smaller. Sometimes they don't have children with disabilities. They don't have English language learners. They don't offer that sometimes in a charter, and they get a ton of waivers. Now, traditional public ed can do some waivers too, but traditional public ed must educate all, and all means all. And that's the difference. So these charters should be outperforming traditional public ed at a level that is up here, and we're not seeing that. Now, I also tell them the story of our community and having high poverty. This community has experienced a raid at our meatpacking plant. This community has experienced a flood. And when those situations happened, that neighborhood school was the trusted place for community members, for parents, and for students. Now, when we start plucking kids out of traditional ed, and you don't have enough per pupil funding, and you're starting to lose students, there's a hard choice that districts have to make. They have to close down some schools. They have to be economically smart in using tax money. And that may be shutting down a school, which is very, very traumatic for a community, for a neighborhood. And what I have learned from our community is that neighborhood school is the place that the Weld Food Bank comes through. County resources, instructions on what to do during emergency. All of that comes through that trusted school. So that's another reason why it's so imperative that we really support our public education, because we depend on it as a community. So my message is how important K-12 education is, and that it may have been, under the radar. It's not a very exciting office, although we've gotten a lot of publicity lately. It's an extremely important role. Now, the thing that I've noticed in being elected is that I have privilege. That board that's on there, many of them are retired. Many of them have a lot of money. I still work. And those positions do not pay. And I have a really nice boss that lets me take off for my 2-day meetings. There's lots of visits that I have to do. And I know that's not the privilege of everyone. But I know that my voice and my lens is so important. And I have got to not only be a board member, but I have to figure out, how do I carve out and create space for the next person to come in? That could be a mom. That could be someone that still works. That could be someone that just really cares about public education and really has a passion for kids and making sure that they're successful. How do I carve out room for them to run? I can tell you, when I ran for local school board, I think I raised $2,500. At the state board level, it was $77,000, and I probably could have raised more. And so donations do help a campaign, especially somebody that comes from community who doesn't come from money, who isn't automatically rich, who doesn't have those connections. Those donations do matter. So when you see someone running for your local school board, make sure and make a donation, or donate your time, knock on some doors, make some phone calls, do whatever you can to help support that candidate win, and making sure that your board reflects your community and that it's somebody that truly has a passion for public education. If you don't have a passion for that, I don't know why you're on the board. And I think we should question that. And so when you're looking at candidates, you need to make sure, do they have a passion to make sure kids are successful, and do they support public education? So Again, this isn't an exciting role. I don't get lots of, press time. But it is an important role, and I'll be out there talking to constituents, making sure that I understand rural school districts that are very different than what I came from, and making sure that I listen and making sure that I fight for all kids, and all means all. So I thank you for being here. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. My business cards are back there. I also have some voting stickers, and just continue doing the work that you all do. I think you're all amazing, and I'm so grateful that we have you in our community. Thank you.
Does anybody have a question? We've got a little bit of time we could take to, because I wanted to ask one. How successful have you been in terms of statewide and working with school districts? Because I think this idea, I love this idea of understanding the connection between community and schools and business and tax base. I mean, that is huge and it's so basic. How successful have you been in terms of getting that across in our state?
So I can tell you, school districts are really excited that they have someone that's that vocal about it. I bring it up every chance I can in a meeting and making sure that I connect all the dots for everyone. I think we had a board before that was focused on accountability and being punitive, where I would like us to really be accountability and supportive. And when I was talking to CDE staff, I said, here's the thing. When you're working with a district, and I use my own experience, I didn't know when I first got on the board that we didn't have some intergovernmental agreements. That means that when a new subdivision, pops up, a certain amount per roof is charged to make sure that it goes for schools, because we know we're gonna have to build another school. We're gonna have to make sure that we have room for all of those kids. We didn't have those intergovernmental agreements in place. I didn't know that. And we had some pretty experienced board members when I got on. I thought they had it under control. I did not know we didn't have that. I also didn't know that our facilities plan wasn't as strong as it should be. We just had the best grant people. The best grant is a place where tax revenue, marijuana money goes into, and this best grant board takes, things from different districts of needs that they need, and they help them pay for that. So like if you're doing a bond, you could say, I want to build a new school and we're going to apply for this best grant. If we get the best grant, then the community only has to pay for half of the school. The best grant will cover the other. So there's some really good benefits there. But we just had a meeting and we are over $1 billion behind in making sure that schools are at the level that they should be. Now we're talking safety. We're not even just talking making bigger because we have more kids. We're talking leaking roofs. We're talking about HVAC systems. There's lots of things that communities have not been able to do because one, it takes tax revenue, which means you're gonna have to raise taxes. That's never a positive thing in a community. And two, if you don't have someone who really has that planned out over decades, like how this plan is gonna work, do they have land? On reserve. So when we do need to build a new school, that stuff wasn't in place when I first got on as a board member. I didn't know that. So when I talked to CDE, I said, when you start working with the school district, you need to not only have resources for that school, you need to have resources for that board. You need to have resources for that city council, for that mayor, so they understand what their role is in making sure that this district does well and where we've dropped the ball. And if you really want to fix it, that's what you have to have that tough conversation of where we dropped the ball. And we had dropped the ball in a lot of places here. So CDE cannot be, we know everything about education and we only help the district. We really have to have resources in there for, state board members, and they have CASB and you go as a board member, your first time there and it's board member 101. But I need something specific to my community for me as a board member of what I should be doing and what I need to be looking for. And, Dr. Pilch was actually the one that came in and said, you guys don't have this intergovernmental agreement? Yeah, we need to work on that. So she talked to Evans, she talked to the city of Eaton and created those things. She worked with somebody to make sure that we had a facilities plan, that we have some land that we're eyeing or that we can maybe trade to make sure that we have a school in this part of town. She was thinking of all that stuff. So if you don't have somebody who automatically knows that, But we as a community should know that. We should be having those conversations, irregardless of what our leadership is, because that person could go. So what do we do as a community? So those are things that I've been talking to CDE about when you go into a community, into a district, you need to make sure that you have those resources for them to help them as a board and as a city council, even as a county. The county is responsible too. All of these people are responsible to make sure this district does well, because we all benefit when it does do well. We benefit when we have a good workforce graduating from our schools. We benefit when we have somebody who's invested in our community, goes to college and comes back to work. We definitely benefit from having smart kids coming back and being community members and being part of, our society and making sure that our community continues to do well. We all benefit from that, whether you have a kid in the district or not. But if you don't tie people into that conversation, into that story, then it's really easy to say, I don't have a kid, I don't care, I'm old, I don't care. But who's going to be that doctor that takes care of you, or maybe comes up with a new, cure for something? All of those things we have to be thinking about, and it's all interconnected and layered, where I think people pull it apart and just deal with this one part of it. So I'm having that conversation at the state level, and I'm going to start having that with legislators to think about what kind of legislation we can put in place to help our districts, help our communities, and help them be successful on their own without the state coming in and saying, okay, now you need to change your boundaries, or you need to dissolve your district, because that is hard to come back from. Even our reputation of what our district was like before, we struggled for years trying to change that narrative of, we're not that school anymore, we're this school. But because so many people were hooked on that, it was hard to change that. And you have people telling stories, and it's like, but when did that happen? Well, back here. Okay, but we're not that school anymore. We're a different community, we're a different district. Let's tell that story. Now, if you have concerns about right now, I want to hear them. But don't tell me that story from 10 years ago, because we're different. So I definitely agree that we need, and Kathy Plomer, who's the at-large person, she's the same way. She comes from a local board level. She was on Adams 12. We're like right here. We're talking about community. We're talking about how those all connect. And so we are definitely out there pushing it. Lisa Escarzaga is another person that kind of has that same mindset.
Okay, thank you.
I'd like to know a little bit of if the state board members like yourself have input into colleges in our state. Do you just do elementary, or do you all, and high school, secondary, and then college? Do you do all of that? And I'd like to know what you're really, if you have any input into things like critical thinking in the programs themselves.
Mm-hmm. So curriculum and that type of stuff is a local level decision. We could set the standards of what we expect to see in that curriculum and what will meet the standards, but it's local level decisions on what really happens with that curriculum. I agree with you though, that there has to be a conversation between K-12 and higher ed though, because right now what you're seeing is local school districts finally recognizing biliteracy, people who speak multiple languages, who read, write, and speak it. And that has a certain, we give them a certain status with that, they're biliterate, they graduate and they're biliterate. That ends at the college level. There's no extra additional credit they get, which they should, especially now in the business industry. I mean, if you're biliterate, you just opened up some extra doors that somebody else may not. And what's been interesting is when you talk about, how Colorado started in 3 different languages, they pushed that everything would be in those 3 languages so that the residents, the citizens would understand and recognize all the stuff that was happening in government. And that has shifted over the years. I think it was 1987 maybe, where it changed, where it was English only. But now you go here to 2023, 2022 is the first time in Weld County you could request your ballot in Spanish. So there is a definite shift that's coming, and those people that are biliterate are going to have a lot of opportunities here because the language has never gone away. Spanish has always been here. When you say our state, that's Spanish. When you say some of our counties, that's Spanish. When you say some of our roads, that's Spanish. It's never gone away, and it's not going to go away, especially when you talk about in a high agricultural community. We know from the raid that happened at Swift, nobody wants to take those jobs. we have to have immigrants, we have to have migrants, we have to have refugees to come in and fill those jobs, which means there's going to be a different culture, there's going to be a different language. And so there is definitely a shift of this monolingual kind of perspective of, no, we need to really encourage kids to speak multiple languages. And obviously, you know, if you don't use it, you lose it. Spanish is a key language to make sure that kids know. So there's some discrepancies between K-12 and college where we're starting to give them credit here, and then there's nothing. There's no extra. And you're even seeing that in the workforce, where before, if you had this extra talent, they would use it, but they didn't pay you for it. And you should be compensated for that. That is definitely a skill. And translation is very expensive. So if you have a worker that is doing that for you, they should be paid for that, because you're gonna be paying a lot more for a translation service.
But what I'm concerned about is that there's not enough people going into the teaching field, and we don't have teaching staff coming on board. You know, our stable back there is weak, and we need to really buck that up. Do you have any influence in getting that done?
So legislators are trying to combat that. But again, I'm gonna tell you, if you're a teacher and you're not making a ton of money for doing hard work, and then you have people coming into your school, you're getting emails and being threatened, would you stay?
No.
And so that's why I'm saying community has to step up, you know, and really surround our district, our teachers, and support them and have their back, because they are getting attacked left and right. And they have so much on their plate. I mean, we're depending on them to make sure that they, you know, have this certain score. And they need to be worrying about kids and educating kids. They don't need to be worrying about this other stuff. They went to college to be able to do this job, and we have to trust them to do their job. Now, if you have a parent that's really passionate about education, I say you go to college and you become a teacher, because we need you. We need more teachers. But you're not going to come in and second guess our teachers, because they're professional, they're educated, they know what they're doing, and they have support. And so we need to make sure as community, we go into these boardrooms and we're, you know, cheering on our teachers and tell them, we got your back. We're not going to let this happen to you. You keep doing what you're doing. Don't, you know, worry about that. You keep educating our kids. That's a hard job. We appreciate you for doing that, and continue doing it. We got you.
Thank you.
What would you suggest the league do to get some people of color on the League of Women Voters, and how would that affect things?
You know, I think, again, it's making sure that people have access to you. Access and barriers are a huge thing. You know, we have some parents that are working 2 jobs to try and get it done. Again, me running for the state board, I have privilege. You know, I have a family that takes care of stuff when I'm gone. I only have 1 job. And, you know, I've had experience in training in a lot of different ways that kind of help me prepare for this, because it's not easy running. You get attacked. You know, people come after you, they say some pretty rude and harsh things. Campaigning is a animal all in its own. And if you didn't have to do that and you just ran, it would be so much different. And, you know, the other part of this is it takes so much money to run. You know, I look at our county commissioners and we don't have a voice there, many of us. And so how do you disrupt that? But then I think of how much money it would take to run. You're not going to get a good person that will put themselves, 1, and as a target, and 2, trying to come up with that kind of money. So there's definitely some barriers that we have created as a society that we need to consider. How do we take some of those barriers out, or how do we move around them? How do we, and voting is one of them. You get enough people to vote for you, then you can open up some doors, whether people like it or not.
What is the trend these days in terms of accountability, you know, for teachers? In other words, how are they judged? Are we?
So this is a big discussion.
Yeah.
We have lots of districts that kind of feel like our accountability system is skewed, and I would agree. And when I campaigned, we're not going to get away from how do we make sure that we kind of have some kind of comparison that, you know, districts and schools are doing well. Federal people want to know that, you know, legislators in the state want to know that. So we're not going to get away from testing. That's going to be there, but it should be a data point, not the data point. And that's what it's been. It's been the data point. And the ramifications of, well, there's a winner and there's a loser. There's a school that's doing well, a school that's doing, bad. And that really can't be our conversation around education. It can't be accountability and punishment. It really should be accountability and support. How do we help them, raise the bar? Where is that? The other part is we put so much into this testing and that score, but by the time that score comes out,
Oh, yeah.
the teachers can't really do anything.
Yeah, right,
And
right.
it tested right here and they just had this many months of additional school. That may not be where the kid is now.
Right.
That was back here. And so it is skewed. And we need to figure out a better way of doing that. And a lot of people talk about growth. And I talk about our story here of when we had that huge influx of refugees because no Americans, flocked to the jobs at Swift when the raid happened. That's how we got that huge influx of refugees. Swift hired someone specifically to seek out the refugees to come work those jobs because nobody else would. Well, when you have a kid who just came from a refugee camp and entered your school, where they start and where they end is a miracle. That is miracle work that teacher is doing,
Yeah.
but it may not show up on a test score. So how do we give teachers credit for that hard work that they do in a school of poverty or a school that may not have as many resources or a school that has a lot of refugees or has over 100 languages? How do we make sure that those teachers get the credit that they deserve for doing that hard work versus a school that doesn't have hardly any free and reduced lunch, or doesn't have, more than 2 languages, or doesn't teach any kids with disabilities? You have to be able to compare apples to apples. And right now that's not happening. We're taking the good and the bad and then giving you an average, which isn't fair.
But that's fairly specifically schools. I mean, individual teachers. How are they being rated? Is it still so based on, test scores, the individual teachers' test scores of their students?
It was really bad before.
Yeah,
That has changed.
okay.
Yeah. But
So there is a
until,
trend away from that.
yeah, but until we get away from, this is your school, you're a teacher in this school, you're still going to be held accountable for that school's
Yeah.
test scores. So that's why I'm
Mhm.
talking about, we have to
Okay.
change something there.
Mhm.
And you don't see as many just individual kind
Yeah.
of, stuff. It's usually a school and a district.
Well, another reason the teachers are getting caught between a rock and a
Mhm.
hard place.
Agreed. Mhm. It's
Yeah.
hard work and they don't get credit for the
Yeah.
work that they do. And so again, we as community have to push our legislators to make sure that we have, a system that supports our teachers. We have to figure out a different way tax wise too. Maybe they get a city tax relief. Maybe they get a county tax relief so that they can actually afford to live in the community that they serve.
That would be nice.
We have to come up and be innovative on different ideas on how to support teachers. And it's not just a salary, but there's all these other benefits that can help. I just came from a school in Johnstown. They have a brand new high school, Roosevelt High School, that they're building. The school is going to be phenomenal. And they're a smaller community. They can't compete with some of these larger districts and salaries and stuff, but they are hoping that the way they treat teachers with more space, more natural light,
Mhm.
different opportunities to teach kids in different, realms of mathematics or science, that will, intrigue teachers enough to stay because they can't compete salary wise. And they have a lot of stuff around, social emotional issues for kids. That could be a benefit for a teacher too, because they know that that's getting taken care of and they're not going to have to be the counselor in the room all the time, which they have been over the years. So there's different things that districts can do to make the life of a teacher,
Yeah.
a lot easier and make their job actually enjoyable and they could do what they were hired to do and not be a counselor all the time.
Johnstown, for instance, is burgeoning.
It is,
So,
it is.
They've really got a lot of, to do in terms of future focus.
Mhm, mhm. And that school is gonna be phenomenal.
Mhm.
I'm really excited about it. When I toured, I hope to see it when it's completely done and go in there.
Mm.
They have, innovation speaking, they have welding, they have things around agriculture, all these different, career pathways for kids to experience within the K-12 system
So good.
and, kind of set them
Yeah.
up and certificate programs.
Right.
So,
Good.
Well, we could spend hours with you. But we'll be back And I know you'll be back, and we just really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
And we've learned a lot. So
Good, good,
thank
good.
you.
Yeah.
Feel free to reach out.
Oh, of course.
Oh, for Instagram. Whoa.
IG.
Oh, that's right, yes.
Okay, now the really fun part starts. Actually, normally the business meeting sounds like rural.
Yeah.
But usually we're pretty efficient and it's not too terrible. So, one thing that Sandy told me that I forgot to tell you is that if you have silverware, which she insisted upon having, not plasticware, there's a basket over there that you can put it in. Okay, now I'm gonna,
Kathy, and if you want more coffee, he's going to come, so get more coffee if anybody wants.
oh, okay, yeah. You want coffee or food?
Or food.
And we're saving the food, so we'll have some afterwards that can be taken home. Now, we're gonna begin the business meeting with knowing that Sandy Magnuson and myself have enjoyed the year. We really have, working together. It has been good. And it's worked well. I just want you to know that having two people do this job, as long as you're compatible, it's great. Don't go with somebody you're not compatible with.
Oh, my.
That was a compliment over there.
So we have enjoyed this year and for a variety of reasons are just not going to be able to continue to do it next year. So, and we'll deal with it later in the business meeting. The annual meeting minutes are either on the back table or you may have them from last year. And Jessica Hope puts that together and she does a really good job and it is so useful. We look back and say, what did we do? What did we say? What did we decide we were going to do? So it's a good document for us to have. So I don't believe that we have to approve them. Am I correct about that? Yeah. But I just want you to know that they're there and that if you need to correct anything or you say, no, we didn't do that, please let Jessica know. Now, but we do need a volunteer committee of preferably 2 or 3 who would look over the minutes that Jessica will put together to make sure that they are accurate for this meeting. So is there anyone, and you'll do that after she gets it all done and she'll send it to you. Is there anyone who would be willing to do that? It's like a 5-minute job. It's not difficult. Okay, thank you, Barbara. And I need to write this. Oh, you're getting it.
I used to.
Okay, Barb, and anybody else who's willing to check her work?
Meeting minutes.
And Kathy, yes, okay.
Because I mean, it's Joe.
She's such a good help.
Okay, the next thing is Bonnie Funk is going to tell us about our money.
Court recorder.
And if you don't have a treasurer's report, it's back there.
Yeah. All right, finish.
So you've all you've all gotten copies of the treasurer's report in your email and there's copies back there. I can point some things out to you or I can just say, do you have questions? What's your pleasure? Would you like me to show you some things? I don't know.
Is there anything noteworthy?
Yeah, highlights.
Highlights. Well, one thing I would point out is that when you look at the contributions, it seems like we've got an exceptional amount of contributions this year, which is true. But of the things listed up there as contributions. At least $500 of that was money specifically given as a memorial. Oh, help me. Sue Schultz, as a Sue Schultz Memorial Fund. So there's at least 500 of that contributions that is above what we would expect to be normal. You would also notice clear at the very bottom of the sheet, see the money market balance? That's a new fund. That is the Sue Schultz Memorial Fund, is the major part of that. We put some extra money in there to be able to earn interest on that also, but she left us with an amazing endowment to be able to earn some money and then have a little bit easier money to spend. I'm thinking as you look at interest income, if you look over the last years, I think we haven't even made $4 over the last years. And already this year we have $85. That's because of that memorial fund that we're earning interest on some money there. Membership dues looks like it's down so far this year, but remember, we're only partway through the year. And so lots of people renew their membership dues before this year is over. So I can talk to you about the finance drive. So finance drive, we spent $509 this year on that. We brought in that 2,800 basically in contributions because of the finance drive. Always remember, the finance drive is more than just getting people to contribute money. It's also our major push of letting people know what the league is doing through the year via mail. So everybody gets something in the mail with that. State and national PMP, you'll notice, is about double, almost double of what it has been in the past. And that's because we were paying 2 years of dues this year. If you remember my telling you that last year, that this was going to be a chunky year, and it is. So, any questions from there? I will ask you for, we have one volunteer already. Tommy has already said he would serve on the financial audit committee. I personally really like it when we have at least 2 people who are not board members who serve on the financial audit committee. It takes about 3 hours on one morning. Kathy will do that. Okay. And then there needs to be a third person. Anybody else up for the 3-hour job? It's a really hard job. You sit with a stack of papers and somebody's looking at my checkbook and somebody's looking at all the receipts and somebody's looking at bank statements, and
Yeah,
you
but
just-
she serves herbal tea, so.
you just go through and make sure that the treasurer is not absconding with money or spending it recklessly. And is there a third person that would do that this year? We got 2.
Oh, I'll do it.
You'll do that?
Stand for right.
Surely.
I've done it before.
All righty.
Yeah.
All righty, that'll be 3 of us, so that will be fine. Is there anything else?
And the only other thing is on the back of the treasurer's report is there were some policies that the board put together for this Sue Schultz, because it was enough money that we wanted to have some rules about how we would use that money. And the one thing that we wanted to keep in mind is that Sue Schultz was a huge advocate of voter education and voting. And so voter service is the thing that we want to focus on in using that money, but we may, depending on what happens in the future with the league, we might need it for something else. But at any rate, these are the rules. The leadership council has already approved these, so we don't need membership approval. But if you can look them over, and if you have any thoughts or comments or something that you think ought to be added or changed, we'd certainly be receptive to that.
Okay, so next, the program, and this is always confusing for us because program in the language of league is what we do. It's not a meeting or a show or a program that we're going to do. It's what we do through the year. So the three things that are listed where it says presentation of proposed program for 23-24, we basically are suggesting, this is the Leadership Council, that we continue to do the things that we've been doing, focusing on those. The first of which is looking at the redistricting process of the Weld County. And that is huger than we thought it was gonna be. And we'll, I guess we won't really hear a report from you, but Barb Winterig has been working on that big time. And we're still in the middle of it. So we're not done yet. But it is really, really important and complicated. So we're, as a league, we're working on hoping that we can not only educate ourselves, but the public in terms of what's happening with that and how the county commissioners have gone about this and whether or not we want to stick with that or if there's some changes that could be made.
Or actions that could be taken.
Oh, and actions that could be taken. Kathy?
That would have to do with my question.
Uh-huh.
Are we looking at possible legal action?
Do you want, is this appropriate time or you want to do a?
Well, we
Oh,
can,
sorry.
I mean, it really is the appropriate time
Okay.
because we're not gonna have you do a report because we don't have time.
Oh, that's right. Well, just a short report. We followed up, did a Cora request after we testified, and several of us did,
And
representative.
tell people what a core request is.
I will when I get there.
Oh,
but-
sorry.
Well, March 1st was the last hearing to testify in support or against the proposed boundary changes for the Weld County school district, Weld County Commissioners, I'm sorry, had to shift gears. And there was 3 groups that did, actually Loretta did. Kathy was there as a supporter. I did on behalf of the league, Bev Wallace did on behalf of the Weld County Democratic Party. And Stacy Sunia did on behalf of the Latino Coalition of Weld County. There was over 50 letters that were submitted to the commissioners in opposition to approval of the map that they were trying to approve, and 1 in support. But nevertheless, they approved the resolution to approve the map. So we followed up, and a core resolution is a public request. Anybody can do it. But we as an organization did it and asked for all the information that had happened around the process of creating the maps, selecting the maps, and making decisions about the maps. And if not, to see whether or not there's any ex parte communications between commissioners, between board staff members, etc. We have received 115 documents. Many of them we can't open. But we do have, I think, the essence in packets of PDFs, all the letters that were submitted, any communications from outside of the commissioners in regards to questions about the maps and also statements of where people stood. There were 3 maps. There's a question of why, how, and why they chose the map they did. So we've been going through all that information, trying to figure out whether or not it was what we asked for. The biggest point of contention is, do they follow state statute as established by House Bill 1047? That was 191047, I think. And the home rule charter.
Yeah.
That's the question.
Yeah.
It's a legal question. So we are in conversations about next step and what kind of legal actions we can take.
Okay.
And with the national, I had a meeting with the state board, or with our executive director, our state lawyer, and the advocacy team with the litigation team at National. We just explored things, talked about where we could go, what the choices were. We're waiting for the General Assembly or the legislature to conclude so we can get back and talk to other people that are involved at the state legislature level as to what next. But yeah, we are discussing legal action.
And the other thing I think that's important to know is that we're trying to work in coalition with nonpartisan
Yes,
organizations,
Mhm.
including the Latino
Yes,
Coalition of Will
we
County.
are.
And so we're not just doing this on our own. I mean, we have friends
And we need more.
and we need, yeah,
We need a community.
yeah. So that's the first thing. And then the second thing that is equally important is the Observer Corps and continuing to develop it and training the observers and then observing regularly government boards and councils. And Sandy Magnuson has been the organizer of that and has done a beautiful job with the school board particularly. And, but there are other places, county commissioners being one, and that's really the hardest to observe, but it is important, especially now. And she's got some, what are they, Sandy? Invitations to observe. And there are all kinds of ways you can do it. So it can be in person, or you can, almost all of these boards have some kind of online method of watching them. And it's important for them to know that we are watching. And then the third thing is incorporating diversity, equity, and inclusion into our goals and partnerships and working with other organizations for voter registration, which we do, voter information, ballot issue presentations, and information about the ballot. So, and there are a number of ways in which we do that now, but we want to expand that. We want to continue to do that. Barb and I are working with Ames Community College currently and have really, I think we've got a nice, pretty strong relationship
We do.
now
We have a
with
good working
Ames,
relationship.
and that's been good.
Yeah.
So we want, those are the three things that we want to continue to do and focus on the next year. So we need to vote on this, right, Jean? Yeah. So do I hear a motion to accept this proposed program?
So moved.
Motion to accept,
Okay,
accept.
thank you. Kathy, you can decide who did it. Is there a second?
Then I'll second.
The other one.
Okay. And any discussion? All right, those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? All right, motion passes. Now, we had to make a slight change in our bylaws, and our bylaws expert is going to tell us what they are. And it was a very long document, but she cut it into a half sheet. So that's what's at the back table.
I find it ironic that the amendment that we have to do is to allow us to make changes to our bylaws. At some point in time, there was a statement in the bylaws about being able to amend the bylaws, and it vanished. We don't know when. I went back and searched back about 5 different versions of the bylaws and couldn't find it. So what we are adding is Article 10 to our 4-page set of bylaws. And Article 10 is in front of you in red. And it says, if I can get my fingers working here. These bylaws may be amended by a 2/3 vote of the members in attendance at the annual meeting of the League of Women Voters Greeley-Weld. Proposals for change shall be submitted to the Leadership Council 2 months prior to the date of the annual meeting. All such proposed amendments, together with the recommendations of the Leadership Council, shall be sent to the membership at least 1 month prior to the date of the annual meeting. Adoption of the proposed amendments will become effective immediately following approval by the membership at the annual meeting. So I would encourage you to vote for this so that we can amend our bylaws in the future. I just find this very amusing, but it really has to be done. So is there a motion to approve the amended bylaws?
I
Bonnie?
move we approve the amendments as shown.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, pick one, Kathy or Kathleen. Any conversation or questions?
It's a good thing.
They will go into effect immediately upon approval. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you, I'm done.
All right. Now, Sandy, did you have anything more that you would like to say about the Observer Corps?
Only that the redistricting called our attention to how important this is. Because you just happened to know about it, but no one was observing, watching. So it's critically important, and we only have school board covered right now, so please consider it. We can have a nice training. It's, the advantages are really quite. I'd like to volunteer. Great, I'll be in touch with you. Wonderful. Excellent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Keep getting me in the loop. I'm a new kid, but I'll learn.
It's, you'll learn yes by doing it. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. And a lot of times, it sounds boring. In fact, I've sat through many school board meetings and it's like, oh, until midnight. Is this ever going to be over? But what people don't realize is the decisions that are made by these elected officials in these meetings affect you. And they don't know it until
Yeah.
6 months later, when they get a tax bill, or 6 months later, when their district lines change. So it's really important that we stay on it and that we get others to understand that it's important to stay on it. Okay, now we come to probably the hardest part of this meeting.
Could I say something?
Certainly.
If anyone here knows anyone who is interested in running for school board or commissioners, please contact Kathy or me, somebody, so, because we'll figure out how to get money for them, because they might not know that, and training to run for those offices. But we need candidates really bad.
All right.
So
can I speak on that
Yeah.
real quick? So I do know that Natalie Mash is running again. Brenda is running again, and then they have another person, Doran Azari. And those are three really, really good candidates. So definitely reach out to them and see if you can help them in any way, shape, or form. Dorian was taught in the district, and so he knows a lot about education and stuff. And now he's been an amazing person on the board. She comes as a nurse perspective, and Brenda's a doctor. And she is that, Latino voice that we need at the board level. So all three of them are absolutely amazing.
Great.
thank you.
Good to know. Okay, now we look at the proposed leadership council for next year, for 23-24. And we have 4 positions that are open. The first of which is chair or co-chair, tri-chair, however everybody wants to do it. So the second one is a member meeting coordinator. And that's a pretty simple job. It's just simply making sure that, for example, with this meeting, that we have a place to meet and we can get in, and if there's a speaker, is that speaker going to show up? And basically that's it. Maybe cookies. And you can always get volunteers to help with all of that. So is there any, all right, well, I'll go through all of them first. Then the third one is voter registration coordinator. Now we've managed to live without that, but I don't want to say that too flippantly. It would be great if we had somebody who could simply, when we get a call from an organization or an event, and they say, we would like to have voter registration with the League of Women Voters help. If someone were able to, then all that job would entail is calling us and getting some volunteers to go over to Windsor or wherever and be there at their event to register voters, to help people understand what that means. So that's the third. And then the fourth is the membership coordinator, which Kathy Heisey has done for the last year with spectacularly. But I'm not going to say that you couldn't follow in her footsteps. But she is not going to continue next year. And she's mainly, that it just entails keeping track of new people, letting them know about the league, finding out what they're interested in. And it's really made a difference for us to have somebody in that job. So do I have any nominations from the floor? Start there. Okay,
Well, I have volunteered to do the membership, if you'd like.
so we're nominating you, Julie, to do the membership coordinator?
Yes.
Okay, so Julie Widow has been nominated. Are there any others? Are there any people who are interested in any kind of we've done a variety of ways to do leadership, the chair position, in which we've had 3 do it.
Yep.
We had a triumvirate for a
I
while.
was part of that.
And then we had
And the
this
co.
this
And I
past
said
year, which has
individual.
really eased up the work. I speak from experience, and it really has made it easier. So is there anybody who would be willing to step into that role? Well, if we don't have any volunteers, I think what we're probably going to have to do is deal with that at the leadership council level to figure out what to do. Unless somebody has another suggestion. There are some people that we've thought of who aren't here. I'm not going to nominate.
That's why you should come to
Yeah,
that.
Let's see, Tennessee tour, but that would really be terrible to do that.
And
too.
I'm always willing to help advise.
Yeah,
or
yeah,
mentor.
sure. Well, you all are, of
Yeah.
course. Yeah, yeah. Sandy, I'd be happy to do that. So I think we'll have to deal with that at the next leadership council meeting. So be thinking about it. Okay, and then any other nominations, the member meeting coordinator or the voter service? I've taken on the ballot issues presentations coordinator, so that job, which is, I mean, it's I don't know if it's messy, but anyway, it needs to be done and it's important. So
It helps me.
yeah, right. Yeah, Barb, because Barb does a huge job with voter service. Okay, so I guess Julie's been nominated and we don't have to vote on her, do we?
We can just vote on the slate, I think.
Yeah, we can just vote on the slate.
Well, if we do,
I would be willing to step into voter registration
All right,
coordinator.
thank
Well,
you.
you were gonna kind of modernize it.
That's the hope.
That's right, you can make it all tech.
Well,
Do it on
we can do.
Instagram. Okay, great. Thank you, Sierra.
Oh, thank you.
well, Kathleen, if we're going to vote on the whole slate, we need to take me off of Facebook and put Sierra on. She had agreed to do this and she's ready now, so she.
Yep.
Well, on the new
the
one,
one they
it's
have?
on the new
Oh,
one.
okay.
On the new
It's on
one,
the
it's
back.
got Sierra.
Okay.
So, and then so Sierra will put into the, where is it?
Here.
Fourth from the bottom.
Yeah, I know, not just Facebook, but the other one. What did you say? Oh,
Voter
voter
registration.
registration. Okay, so has everybody got the slate straight? All right,
So did she-
those in favor of approving the slate for 23-24 as it stands now. Could change.
Applaud loudly.
Yeah, applaud loudly, yes. All right. Say aye. Aye. Those opposed? All right, so we've got not everything, but we've got some, and we appreciate those of you who have stepped in. All right, the next thing is we need to have a nominating committee, and that is, as Julie and I know, since we weren't able to fill 4 of the slots this time around, is a really important job in finding people who are willing to serve for the 24-25. Can you get that in your heads?
Oh, my gosh.
I know. 2025 year. So are there volunteers for being on the nominating committee for next year? Well, all right, you put me down.
Okay.
I'll do that.
Is Julie gonna stay on it?
I would work on that also.
Okay, so I'm Bonnie. Julie, do you want to continue?
No. That's a hard,
It is a hard
I
job.
think the most difficult thing is how do we reach the people that we don't see often? And whether that might be at the picnic or some get together, I don't know. But I'd really like to see that happen, and I'm not sure I know how to do that.
One of the things we, on the state board, realized that, we were starting to recruit people, for leadership responsibilities and things. And a lot of them didn't really know what it was all about. So, how do we, first of all, we said that the nominating committee piece was going to be a year-round job in a way. So how can you start maybe inviting people to leadership meetings? How can we help get them in the role of assisting with, like meetings or membership or signing people up so that we're not sitting here at this time of year saying, well, you want to sign up for this job? What is it? What do you do? What's all involved? But kind of start building a bench, so to speak.
Yeah.
So looking at it from a different way, that it isn't just like the month before the meeting, we're calling like mad, seeing who wants to be part of it. But Eric, we make some calls and you're part of membership now. And, invite people to our council meetings are open and say, and then start,
And
hopefully
you
getting
don't
them.
have to be there physically. We got
It during Zoom and, say, well, would you like to help with this event or help with voter registration or help with a candidate form? So they we do an awful lot. And if you don't know what we do and how we do it, it's very overwhelming.
I think membership involvement is the key. really.
Yeah, membership engagement really is. And I think we really need to start talking about membership outreach too. And and actually our experience, Kathleen and my experience with Ames is kind of teaching us, or at least me too, that, we need to reach out to the community and do some more education. Education about what the boards do, education about what kinds of qualifications we need for candidates and what their responsibilities are, because people just don't know. And, I'm thinking about, a partnership with the libraries and doing some presentations. Our presentation last week was all about how do you make your voice heard as a citizen and how you can have access to all the boards. Get online. Here's how you can find who your representative is. Here's how you can talk to your representative. And that just we have to do more on that voter education piece. So I don't know where that went, but there's a lot of possibilities, and I think that also helps get us memberships.
So, I'm sitting here, I'm hatching ideas. I'm always hatching ideas, okay? So one came to me today that seems very, very likely that we could put this together. I'm a member of Zonto, which we have a scholarship we give every year called Young Women in Political Public Affairs. And we give that every year. And I'm thinking if we could get a membership into the League of Women Voters with that scholarship, that would involve that student who's interested in public affairs in knowing where to go to get information through the league. And this might be a little spark to spark some communication in the colleges and in the high schools to bring younger members in. I think right now there's a real need for expanding civics in our society. And so we need to open some doors there in terms of inviting the young people into, I'm looking at all of the colors of your hair, excuse me. But- And I'm realizing there's some, rare people over here, which is really, really wonderful to see. But, we need to bring young people in. And so it occurs to me that this is a possibility, and I will work on trying to get this together.
Oh,
So
thank you.
Awesome. Good.
Yeah.
That'd be
Good.
great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So just to point it out to Loretta, membership for students in the league is free.
See that kind of information,
Any
we can spread that
student.
information. I work with other young people in other organizations, lots of them right now. We're reaching out with Women in Careers. We could bring this kind of information into that program and bring in some people from here to talk about what you do as a person and also what you do in the league. I mean, that could go together. And so there's lots of possibilities here. We just need to expand our imagination and get the ideas, so know that I'm open to hearing them and putting them into place. If you have ideas about that, we need to get it together and get out there and do civic education.
Okay, yes.
Good. You're on.
So
the
as an outside observer,
list. Sure.
you have this young person who, definitely has.
We have
tech
Kevin and
skills.
Jessica that are.
And Kevin and
They're
Jessica.
slightly older.
And
but
Kevin
not
and
that
Jessica.
Didn't appreciate it.
What I might suggest too is even doing some Facebook Live interviews of some of you. You all have so much knowledge, so
Yeah.
much experience,
Yes.
and just some short little, Facebook Live to talk about the league and what you all do. And then possibly later on, even creating some videos about how to do some of this work and, inviting them, because meetings are great, and this younger generation is, it's a lot shorter, it's instantaneous, it's quick access.
Yeah.
So videos of, what you do, what the roles are, would be very helpful. And maybe even an intern that would work with you to, learn about the organization. And I know in any group, it's always important that when you're in leadership, you're looking at that next person to fill your shoes. And it's really important that they understand what that role is. So even kind of foreseeing that next person and having them work with you to prepare them to actually just slide on in. So you don't even have to try and pick someone. You've been, helping
Yeah.
someone and, helping them learn, and they're ready after, working with you and really understanding and learning so much from you and able to step up. Just an outside suggestion.
Oh, I think it's a great
And
suggestion.
it is a
Thank you.
great
Great.
suggestion. Yes, yes.
Absolutely.
All right. You're on it.
I would even say like if Barb was going to give like a presentation about the league to
Uh-huh.
a younger group, like I would go along. So they could see what that looks like and get a perspective from their generation of like, why is this important? So I think that could be something we look at
Sure.
too.
This Thursday, and I can forward it to everybody. I sat in on a Zoom presentation from the League of Women Voters from Pittsburgh. And they have a whole civic education they have put together that they go out and do junior highs, high schools, colleges, community colleges. They talk about seniors too, as an outreach program. And they supplement the civics curriculum from the standpoint of what you just said. It's not as much about how it all works. It's how we've been involved and worked with it and our stories about what we've done and what we've learned and how we navigate the system
And why you do it.
and why we do it, how important it is. I don't know, I was so jazzed about that. After that, I'm gonna create a voter service, voter education committee at the state level, because we've just been kind of sitting idle. But we're gonna get, I'm gonna ask local leagues to start looking at this because I think it's a terrific strategy to do the outreach, to start bringing in younger people, because they don't know who we are or what we do or why we're doing it. So I'm on it. I'll send it out.
Thank you.
I'll send it to somebody, will send it. I don't have a distribution list. But it's you know, and what I was excited about is everybody that was working on it was excited. Because it just, you know, it's like your possibility thinking. Everybody just started, let's do this, let's make this more understandable. Let's start with some infographics. You know, not just droning on, but start to really put things in pictures. That's my thing. But I think there's a lot of possibilities and I like the energy I feel.
Oh, that's
around all of
great.
this.
Yeah, there are two good ideas.
Yeah.
Yes. And the next item makes me think, I'm gonna just do a little sidebar. And I should have asked this earlier, are the State Board of Education meetings Zoom? All right,
You can watch it
Yeah,
live.
yeah.
so,
they're recorded.
so you can,
And the league is trying to get an observer
Yeah, I
code
think-
for them.
Uh-huh.
It's off to a rough start, but some of us are trying to get on it.
Yeah, are you part of this?
Yes, but we divided up the time, but then, you know what, we're a volunteer organization.
Right. Well, and those are long meetings. I mean, they're all day long
Yeah, we
meetings.
divided
and-
it into 2-hour segments,
Okay.
but that's probably why it didn't happen. Anyway, the plan is still at the state league to do that.
Good, yeah, I think so too.
oh, that's
so.
good.
And I have watched them. It's very easy to access them, so.
Mhm, yeah, it is.
It's a little entertaining sometimes.
Yeah.
The other one I watched was.
So, and speaking of Zoom meetings, then the League of Women Voters of Colorado has their annual meeting, May 19th and 20th. And we have 4 delegates. I volunteered for one, and there was one other person, wasn't there? Oh, Jean.
Yeah.
So that's 2, but it's all Zoom. And it's from like 4 to
It starts
7.
at 4 o'clock in the afternoon on Friday, May 19th, and goes until about 7 or 7:30.
Mhm.
And then it starts again at 8 o'clock in the morning on Saturday and goes till noon.
Right.
And
That's,
it's all Zoom.
yeah, there's a space in those other times, like between 8 and 9 and 4 and 5. That's social hour.
Yeah.
People are just talking to each other. But I think the gavel goes down at 5 o'clock or 5:30 on Friday and 9 o'clock on Saturday.
Oh, okay. But it is a good way to learn a little bit more about what the league does. So who would like to do that?
Sierra,
Sierra? Oh, great.
Well, I've been popping in on different meetings anyway, because I've got time on my hands. I'm disabled and semi-retired. So when I'm building my business, I've got things to do.
Well, we
Sit me
love
somewhere.
that.
Sit me somewhere.
All right.
I do video conferencing. I did it for a living, so, yeah.
Great. All right. And anybody else can go into that meeting. So
There's a
Have
time
you
code?
guys, have you guys already registered?
I have not.
I have.
You have, okay, so, because I'm thinking, so you're volunteering as a delegate?
Sure.
Is that, okay, so I'm thinking maybe, we need to do that online and I need to register you
Okay.
and pay your fees.
It's
and then
$5.
I'll
Yeah.
reimburse.
I
you.
looked at it, and I thought, well, let me find out first. Because I was thinking, well, how do I go? Even though I got a birthday party to do, but I can work it out. And then go from there.
So I'll go on and register the 3 of you and get Jean a reimbursement for her 5.
Great.
Cindy, the league pays for the delegates registration.
Okay.
So she'll do that for us.
Yeah.
So, okay, I was about to do it last night and then I thought, oh, wait.
Yeah, that's what I did too. I thought, well, why don't I wait?
good. I'm glad we
Okay,
got
great.
4 delegates. That's nice.
Are there any other things before we do our last little bit? Any
Well,
comments?
I have one thing,
Mhm.
and a big heartfelt thank you to you, Kathleen and Sandy, for stepping up and being our leadership
co-chairs this year. Really, you've done a great job. Thank you so very much.
Thank you.
That's, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's been fun. It really has. And really, truly, I've done it on my own and it's much better
Yeah, it's nice to
with a
have.
partner. It really is.
Absolutely, I'm sure.
So think about that. You people who are compatible.
I'm really getting worried. She keeps mentioning that word.
Okay, the last thing I want to do is make a big, huge thank you to someone who is just representing us so well and has and continues to do this. So this is not like farewell. You did a good job. This is, we're with you. We've got your back. And this is for Barb Winnery. Barb. So you don't have to get up.
Okay.
You can just follow me.
All right, oh, that's beautiful.
So, and.
Oh, thank you
and
so
you don't
much.
kill it. It tells you how not to kill it.
Yeah, well, I think I've done that and with all the other ones like that. Oh, thank you very much.
So, well, you're welcome, but we really do appreciate what you do. And it does, the community knows us and they know us a lot because Barb is out there speaking for us. And so when you're out in the community, say the League of Women Voters is working on redistricting. We're at the school board. We're paying attention to what's going on in the city council. Anything else before I
Thank you.
adjourn with my.
If you'd like to take flowers, you can. I want one for Dick and Jean, that's it. I've got bags, you can take them in the little pots, we can link up later. And you can just leave the flatware on the table, I can pick it up.
And also food.
Oh, yes,
we
we
have
have food.
And we have some containers. In the tradition of Hazel Gibson. I remembered to bring
Great, always.
containers and baggies so that you could take something home.
You want some flowers?
Okay, the meeting is adjourned.
Thank you for your great presentation. Oh.